Okay, hi everyone, welcome back to this video series on the Comptia Security Plus course, Certificate Authorities. A Certificate Authority, CA, is the entity, usually a server, that issues certificates to users in a PKI system that uses a CA. The CA is known as a trusted third party. Most PKI systems use a CA. The CA is also responsible for verifying the identity of the recipient of the certificate. An example of a technology that uses certificates would be secure websites. If you opened your browser and connect to a secure site, the browser would first check the certificate that comes from VeriSign or another similar company. It would validate the certificate. You, the user, and the website are the two parties attempting to communicate. The CA is a third party that negotiates the security of the connection between you and the website. For a user to obtain a digital identity certificate from a CA, the user's computer must initiate a certificate signing request, CSR, and present two items of information. The first is proof of the user's identity. The second is a public key. The public key is then matched to the CA's private key, and if successful, the certificate is granted to the user. A basic example of this would be if you connect to www.paypal.com. When connecting to the website, it automatically directs you to https www.paypal.com, which is secured by way of a VeriSign issued certificate. You know you have been redirected to a secure site because the browser has various indicators. For instance, the web browser will probably show a padlock in the locked position, and the name of the company will be displayed in green as shown in figure 15.1. Figure 15.1, example of a secure connection shown in Firefox. If you were to click on the green area of the address field in Firefox, you could ultimately get to the certificate details. Figure 15.12 shows the default general tab for the certificate associated with this domain. The general tab shows that the certificate gets a super long hexadecimal serial number and shows when the certificate was originally issued and when it expires, among other information. You can also note that the certificate has been fingerprinted with SHA-256, a variant of SH2 and SHA1, enabling you or the website or issuer to verify the integrity of the certificate. If for some reason the certificate cannot be verified by any of the parties and the issuer confirms this, then the issuer would need to revoke it and place it in the certificate revocation list, CRL. The Details tab gives us advanced and more complete information about the certificate used. I suggest you take a look at a few more websites that use SSL TLS certificates and pursue the General and Details tab. Compare the certificates with each other to learn more about the different levels of encryption, different levels of fingerprinting, and the different issuing companies. One way to add security to the certificate validation process is to use certificate pinning, also known as SSL pinning or public key pinning. This can help to detect and block many types of MITM attacks by adding an extra step beyond normal X509 certificate validation. Essentially, a client obtains a certificate from a CA in the normal way, but also checks the public key in the server's certificate against the hash public key used for the server name. This functionality must be incorporated into the client side, so it is important to use a secure, up-to-date web browser on each client in order to take advantage of Certificate pinning. Recipients can use one or more certificates. Certificate mapping defines how many certificates are associated with a particular recipient. If an individual certificate is mapped to a recipient, it is known as a one-to-one mapping. If multiple certificates are mapped to a recipient, it is known as many-to-one mapping. Multiple certificates might be used if the recipient requires multiple secure and separate communication channels. In some cases, the registration authority RA is used to verify requests for certificates. If the request is deemed valid, the RA confirms the CA to issue the certificate. An RA might also be used if the organization deals with several CAs. In this case, the RA is at the top of a hierarchical structure and verifies the identity of the user. An RA isn't necessary in a PKI, but if you are centrally storing certificates, the CA is necessary. Certificate authorities aren't just for the rich and famous. For example, PayPal using VeriSign as the issuer. You can have a CA too. If you're running a Windows server, you can install your own CA, for example, one that utilizes L2TP or possibly SSL TLS. More of these protocols later in this chapter. Of course, a server's built-in certificates are not necessarily secure. If you were to implement this technology in a secure environment in your organization, you would probably want to obtain proper certificates from a trusted source to use the Windows Server. When implementing certificates in Windows Server, you would use the Active Directory Certificate Services ADCS utility. From there, you can define object identifiers OIDs, which are built into ADCS for either low, medium or high assurance, or you can have Windows randomly assign them. For security purposes, obtain the OID before completing the configuration of the CA. Certificate authorities can be subverted through the use of social engineering. If a person posing as a legitimate company managed to obtain certificates from a trusted source, those certificates would appear to be valid certificates and could cause widespread damage due to connections made by unsuspecting users. That is until the certificates were revoked. This happens sometimes, but the CA issuer usually finds out quickly and takes steps to mitigate the problem, including revoking the certificates and notifying any involved parties of the incident. The Certificate Revocation List, CRL, is a list of certificates that are no longer valid or that have been revoked by the issuer. There are two possible states of revocation: revoked, which is when a certificate has been irreversibly revoked and cannot be used again, and hold, which is used to temporarily invalidate a certificate. Reasons for revoking a certificate include the compromising or theft of a certificate or entire CA, unspecified certificates, superseded certificates, held certificates, and key or encryption compromised. The CRL is published periodically, usually every 24 hours. This enables users of an issuer's certificate to find out whether a certificate is valid. CRLs, like the certificates themselves, carry digital signatures to prevent DOS and spoofing attacks. The CRL is digitally signed by the CA. An alternative to CRL is the Online Certificate Status Protocol, OCSP. It contains less information than a CRL does, and the client side of the communication is less complex. However, OCSP does not require encryption, making it less secure than CRL. An alternative to OCSP is OCSP stapling, previously known as TLS, Certificate Status Request, which allows the presenter of the certificate to bear the cost involved when providing OCSP responses. Certificate keys can also be held in escrow. Key escrow is when a secure copy of a user's private key is held in case the key is lost. This may be necessary so that third parties such as government or other organizations can ultimately gain access to communication and data encrypted with that key. If data loss is unacceptable, you should implement key escrow in your PKI. When installing a certificate authority to a Windows server, you can set up a recovery agent for lost or corrupted keys. To do this, you need Windows Server and need to set up an enterprise level CA. In this configuration, the certificates or private keys are archived at the CA. If a key recovery agent has been configured, lost or corrupted, keys can be restored. It's important to use some type of software that can archive and restore keys in case of an incident or disaster. Another way to avoid single points of failure, such as a single CA, is to organize certificate authorities in a hierarchical manner. At the top of the tree is a root CA. Underneath are subordinate or intermediate CAs that offer redundancy and can sign certificates on behalf of the root CA. Though CA exclusively is common, it is not the only type of architecture used to bind public keys to users. In some cases, a centralized model for certificates is not required or desired. Remember that if a root CA is compromised, all of its certificates are then also compromised, which could affect an entire organization and beyond. The entire certificate chain of trust can be affected. One way to add a layer of security to avoid the root CA compromise is to set up an offline root CA. Because it is offline, it will not be able to communicate over the network with the subordinate CAs or any other computers for that matter. Certificates are transported to the subordinate CAs physically using USB flash drives or other removable media. We discussed the mindset of offline computing in Chapter 9, Secure Network Media and Devices. This is yet another example. Of course, you would need to have secure policies regarding the use and transport of media, and would need to incorporate data loss prevention, DLP, among other things. But the offline root CA has some obvious security advantages comparing to an online root CA. Consider this offline mindset when dealing with critical data and encryption methods. Web of Trust. A web of trust is a decentralized trust model that addresses issues associated with the public authentication of public keys common to CA-based PKIs. It is considered peer-to-peer in that there is no root CA. Instead, self-signed certificates are created and used that have been attested to by the creator. Users can decide what certificate they want to trust and can share those trusted certificates with others, making the web of trust grow larger. Of course, one of the most common reasons that a certificate issuer is not recognized by a web browser is due to unknown self-signed certificates. This model can also interoperate with standard CA architectures inherent to PKI. The more people that show trust of a certificate, the higher the chance that it is legitimate. This model is used by PGP, which enables users to start their own web of trust, self-publishing their own public-private key information security protocols. You can use a variety of security protocols to allow for more secure connections to other systems and networks, but the question is, what should be secured when connecting to other computers? I'd like to break it down into 4 categories: email and other communication. This is accomplished with the use of SMIME or PGP, e-commerce and web logins. This can be brought about with the aid of protocols such as SSL and TLS, direct connections to other computers. This can be done with a protocol such as SSH, virtual connections to remote networks. This can be achieved with virtual private networks and protocols such as PPTP and L2TP. Each of these scenarios builds on the concepts you learned in the previous PKI section. Let's define each of these scenarios and the security protocols used in more depth. SMIME, originally developed by the RSA Secure Multi-Purpose Internet Mail Extensions. SMIME is an IETF standard that provides cryptographic security for electronic messaging such as email. It is used for authentication, message integrity, and non-repudiation of origin. Most email clients have SMIME functionality built in. SMIME uses a separate session key for each email message. SMIME relies on PKI and obtaining and validation of certificates from a CA, namely X.509v3 certificates. It also relies on digital signatures when attempting to establish non-repudiation. SMIME enables users to send both encrypted and digitally signed email messages. SMIME can be implemented in Outlook by first obtaining a certificate known as a digital ID, publishing the certificate within Outlook, and then modifying the settings for Outlook as shown in figure 15.3. One of the issues with SMIME is that it encrypts not only messages but also any malware that found its way into the message. This could compromise systems between the sender and the receiver. To defeat this, scan messages at a network gateway that has a copy of the private keys used with SMIME. Do this after decryption. If an email program stores an SMIME encrypted message and the private key used for decryption is lost, deleted or corrupted, the message cannot be decrypted. SSL TLS secure sockets layer, SSL TLS and its successor transport layer security are cryptographic protocols that provide secure internet communications such as web browsing, instant messaging, email, and VoIP, which is voice over IP. These protocols rely on a PKI for the obtaining and validating of certificates. Many people refer to the secure connections they make to websites as SSL, but actually some of these will be TLS. The last version of SSL, version 3, was released in 1996. TLS is a more secure solution. Version 1 of TLS supersedes SSL v3 as of the writing of this book. The latest version of TLS is 1.2, defined in 2008, with 1.3 as a working draft and an eventuality. However, what you should be most interested in is the strength of the cipher, something to keep in mind when inquiring as to SSL or TLS certificates. TLS and SSL work in much the same manner. Two types of keys are required when any two computers attempt to communicate with the SSL or TLS protocols: a public key and the session key. Asymmetric encryption is used to encrypt and share session keys, and symmetric encryption is used to encrypt the session data. Session keys used by protocols such as TLS are used only once. A separate session key is utilized for every connection. A recovery key will be necessary if any data is lost in an SSL TLS session. SSL and TLS encrypt segments of network connections that start at the transport layer of the OSI model. The actual encryption occurs at the session layer. In general, SSL and TLS are known as application layer protocols. If a server running SSL TLS requires additional processing, consider an SSL TLS accelerator. This can be another computer or more commonly an add-on card that solely works on the CPU intensive public key encryption, namely the SSL TLS handshake process. Your organization might have a policy that states that SSL TLS encrypted data needs to be decrypted when it reaches the internal network and then analyzed for malware and potential attacks. It is often then re-encrypted and sent to its final destination. This is also very CPU intensive, and an SSL TLS accelerator can provide the additional power required. Note that SSL TLS decryption and re-encryption can be a security risk and a privacy issue, especially for BYOD users. BYOD means bring your own device. Careful consideration is required regarding where the decryption re-encryption will take place, how it is implemented, and how people are notified about this policy. HTTPS, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, is a combination of HTTP and either SSL or TLS. Web servers that enable HTTPS inbound connections must have inbound port 443 open. This is common for e-commerce. If you connect to an online shopping portal such as Amazon, your credit card transactions should be protected by HTTPS, and you should see the protocol within the address bar of your browser when you enter a secure area of the website. HTTPS should not be confused with secure SHTTP. SHTTP is an alternative to HTTPS that works in much the same way. Because SHTTP was neglected by Microsoft, Netscape and others in the 1990s, and because SHTTP encrypts only application layer messages, HTTPS became the widely used standard. HTTPS can encrypt all data passed between the client and the server, including data passing through layer 3 email protocols can use SSL TLS as well. For example, there is SSL TLS encrypted POP, which uses port 995. SSL TLS SMTP uses port 465, and SSL TLS IMAP uses port 9931. Attack to watch for is the downgrade attack. When a protocol is downgraded from a high quality mode or higher version to a low quality mode or lower version, many types of encryption protocols can be downgraded. But perhaps the most commonly targeted protocols are SSL and TLS. This is accomplished when backward compatibility is enabled on a system and is often implemented as part of an MITM attack. Obviously, the removal of backward compatibility can help prevent the attack on the server side and on the client side, but also preventative measures against MITM and similar evolving attacks can be beneficial. For example, using an IDS IPS solution within the company network and utilizing encrypted VPN tunnels for data sessions are preventative measures that can be used against downgrade attacks. SSL can be used by attackers as well. SSL encrypted malware such as Zeus or Game Over banking Trojans utilize the secure nature of SSL to exist undetected. Victims are often spammed a false update program that, if opened, downloads a Trojan payload through an SSL encrypted connection from an infected website. The only way an individual user can protect from this is to have updated anti-malware running and not open any unknown attachments. However, organizations can use next generation firewalls, NGFWS, to filter out SSL encrypted traffic. They might use these in addition to the regular firewalls used for unencrypted traffic. So I'm going to leave it here today for this video. If you like listening, please consider like, sharing and subscribing. Thank you.